Hey everyone, thanks for coming out again for one of my little lectures here. This is going to be strictly for U.S. foreign policy, but I think it is valuable for other classes as well. But what I want to talk about today is the President's Daily Brief and why this is important. Now, you read, if you have been reading the Pillar book, and if you did take me for the national security or you are going to take the national security class, I use Lowenthal's book. And he goes over the President's Daily Brief as well. Now, this is a very important document for intelligence. And I really want to kind of talk about it here for this class to stress some important current points that are happening in U.S. foreign policy and national security as well. Now, we have some information. Obviously, I'm not privy to this information, but according to intelligence and analysts, there is evidence. Now, I like to kind of hold off on the evidence part, how strong or weak it is. If you've taken my research methods or statistics class, you understand operationalization, that I take this very seriously on how we measure things. So I'm not going to sit here and say we have strong evidence, but there is evidence that Russia, its intelligence unit, was basically offering money bounty to the Taliban if they killed American soldiers in the area. Now, this is very, very important to understand because the Trump administration, Trump himself, President Trump, has said, I didn't really get a briefing on this, but now evidence is emerging that in the President's Daily Brief, and he said he didn't get briefing, but it's called the President's Daily Brief, that there was information regarding this. Why am I a little hesitant to say strong evidence, weak evidence, etc.? It's important to note that the President's Daily Brief is extremely secretive. It came out, obviously, as you know, as we talked about a wide range of legislature acts that created different branches of the government, as well as the CIA. When the CIA was created after World War II, it basically was in charge of these President Daily Briefs. And they were very, very secretive, particularly for the time. In fact, I would even guess the last time I read, the last one released because you basically have this Right to Information Act well past the time, was during the Nixon and Ford administrations. So that was like before we were even born. So when you look at it, yes, I'm only 25. When you look at it, back during presidents, and then obviously Nixon was kind of left, he wasn't kicked out, and then Ford, that was a long time ago, and I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, those are the last ones that were released based on, the law releasing information now that it's not secretive enough, this clandestine information. So that really gives you a flavor of how secretive these President's Daily Briefs are. And they're very, very important, yet at the same time, Trump is saying now, whether you're pro-Trump, anti-Trump, I don't think that's the case. Bolton is coming out and saying that he was getting tired of dealing and consulting the president on matters of Russia, because the president, love him or hate him, you have to admit, he's not exactly open to criticism and open to different ideas. So Bolton, who's now writing a pretty damning book on the president, it's very, very interesting. Did we have information on this? And this gets even bigger into the intelligence community because although Bolton and national security was not in intelligence, but it does really leak into Trump's relation with the intelligence community. And when we read the Pillar book, obviously that is before Trump, but I did have you read an article by Pillar, which I thought was interesting, on the Trump administration. And Pillar is not a fan of President Trump. His accusations in that article is basically Trump bullies the intelligence agency and intelligent members, as well as the FBI. That's not international necessarily, but domestic. That he basically is a bully and he has a horrible reputation within the intelligence agencies, and they essentially can't stand him. Now, the extent to which that might be true or not is definitely debatable. But does Trump have a very difficult relationship with the intelligence community? And does he prefer to put his own ideas and own platforms before the intelligence community? Now, we have to remember when we talk about this President's Daily Brief as well, that going back to that, the CIA lost a lot of power with the 2004 Terrorism Act. So when they revamped the intelligence community with both Lowenthal, if you read that book, My National Security, and the Pillar book, seemed to be against it. And I think because they have more loyalty to the CIA, and the CIA lost power. They were in control of basically the whole agencies of intelligence. I mean, when I say control, they were basically the director of the intelligence agencies, and they lost that power and then just were kind of relegated to just a regular agency. The CIA lost power with the 2004 act, and I think that this is one of the reasons why they're against it. But the CIA used to be in charge of the President's Daily Brief, but now the Director of National Intelligence is the one in charge, and he's not necessarily in charge of the CIA. As you can kind of see from the readings, the CIA was, in a nutshell, the head of all the intelligence agencies, and they lost a lot of power in 2004. So Pillar, Lowenthal, and others aren't necessarily, they don't find it favorable to the CIA, and I think that they are against it. Now, you'd have to come to your own conclusions, but Pillar, when we get to that part in the book, is very, very much against the 2004 Legislature Act that revamped the whole entire intelligence agency. But the President's Daily Brief are extremely important, and there is evidence now that's saying that the Trump administration did have information that Russia was supporting bounty, that is, payments for killing American soldiers. The question becomes, why would Russia have a self-interest in this? After all, they're just as scared as ISIS, Chechnyan rebels, they would call them terrorists, the Black Widows, which are the female members of the Chechnyan independent movement. They're the wives of dead terrorists, if you're in the Russian government and hate them, and they have committed what could be construed as terrorist acts. I remember when I was living in Nicaragua at a time, and I made relations with a lot of people in the Russian embassy. This was before Putin. You know, they would basically call the Chechnyans animals. And it was Chechnyans who were involved in the Boston terrorist attack that took place a while ago. And I think that Russia and the United States does have just a broad spectrum of issues that they can cooperate on. So you have to ask, if they're against, say, terrorism, Islamic fundamentalism, etc., why would they do this? In my opinion, if it is true, there is growing power struggles in the world between state powers. And that's why I had you read the article on how the Trump administration is changing the national security focus from non-state actors to state actors. And more currently, the FBI director came out and said China is the biggest threat to national security. So we're seeing state actors take a larger role. So if Russia had an interest in killing off American soldiers in Afghanistan, it's part of a world power struggle. You see these kind of rise in powers. Iran wants to be a regional power. That's why it's supporting rebels, the Houthis in Yemen, quite successfully, I would add, because they did take over the capital. And you have the rise of Russia under Putin, who's very popular, and obviously the rise of China. and a lot of contention in the South Chinese Sea, etc. And China is not very popular in a lot of areas of Asia, particularly Vietnam, Philippines, because it's creating islands. I mean, why do you want to create islands? Well, for two reasons. One, you'll have bases all of a sudden in the middle of the ocean, which you didn't have previously, and they're not contested. Well, they are contested, but they're not. The land itself isn't contested because we created them. They're ours. And two, it pulls out your nautical mileage. I taught an international law class that was very interesting, and we did a lot of law of the sea, etc. So I think this all plays into U.S. foreign policy and national security, that there is this kind of rise of these state actors, Russia, which has the ability to, be a world power. It has the energy, it has the amount of people, it has the military capability, etc., as well as China. Now, a lot of people think it's maybe what I'm saying is overblown. They give a big thumbs down to this video, which is fine. But because there's so much rural poverty in, say, China, and Russia still has a lot of poverty, etc. But I think that there is a rise of a new, without lack of a better word, Cold War out there between these rising stars and re-rising, because obviously the Soviet Union was an empire, and now they're going to challenge the United States for hegemonic control. And I think that this is going to lead to something bigger, although in some of my classes, I used to use a book, and a chapter was, will there be a great war again, a war between big, powerful actors? And it's funny because, well, not funny because we're talking about war, but steadily, it used to be no way when I first started the class a long time ago, but it steadily became, people did think that there might be a war between rising powers. So that's something to look at. And I wanted to end with something very, very important, very hot now in Arizona. I don't know where you are watching this. I hope you're safe. Obviously, we're still quarantined. Arizona is increasing significantly. The best way I have thought to stop it is I drink a lot of vodka and whiskey mixed, and that's going to protect me from the coronavirus. So I'm kidding. It's just water. But I think it was Trump. Didn't he say to drink Clorox or something? I don't know. But anyways, the point is that I hope everyone's staying safe, and I hope everyone is doing well, regardless of what you're from. We're still on the path. This is going to change significantly, maybe, to having in-class courses at ASU soon. And I really miss, I know a lot of you have taken me before, and I miss having you in classes and stuff, and I enjoy having you again in the online classes. But without that long rant, I swear that wasn't vodka, I wanted to say this kind of ties into U.S. foreign policy in the sense of who are we supporting? After the Cold War, some people think that there was space created where the United States didn't have to support every ally, that there was space created that we could start focusing on human rights and other things. Now, I know a lot of you are young, so you don't remember with the fall of the Soviet Union, then there was all this kind of hoopla, positive thinking, this kind of zeitgeist of optimism, that, now human rights, gender rights, which are all important, economic rights, economic integration, etc. Then 9/11, Rwanda, before that, the fall of the former Yugoslavia, just disastrous things were going on. So the question, excuse me, I think I'm sick. I probably do have that virus. I do go out a lot. I mean, I don't go out a lot. I follow the guidelines and stuff like that. Now they think it's going to be closing. We're going to be supporting every ally. So Saudi Arabia, because we're such a strong ally with Saudi Arabia, it's not just about oil, but because the Houthis have taken over Yemen, essentially, and we think Iran is behind Yemen now, the Houthi rebellion, etc., Iran is our enemy, so we're even going to beef up support of Saudi Arabia, regardless of its human rights abuses, the killing of the journalist you might know, etc. So the question is, are we going to close human rights? And as you can see behind me, if you've taken me before, ad nauseum, I talk about Latin America. I've been to Argentina, Ecuador, Colombia a lot. I lived in Nicaragua, all over Central America and Mexico. And these are protests in Colombia, as you witnessed. Excuse me. So you basically have the closing of space to support human rights. So we're going to support any ally in a world. I know, look at it, looks like a cake cup from a cake party. Any ally we're going to support, regardless of whether they're brutal dictator, etc., like in the Cold War. That the rise of this rivalry between world powers is closing that space. So like behind me, you see Colombian protesters, and you saw the videos and the Dylan Cruz. What happens now is we're going to just support anyone. So Duque, the leader of Colombia, is, a staunch ally of the United States. So, whatever he does is okay. Whatever Uribe, the president before, who killed a lot of people, it's okay. It's going to be okay for these people because we need allies like never before with the rise of Iran, the rise of Russia, and the rise of China. And then they're going to take advantage. You've heard me talk about Venezuela quite a bit. You saw the video, the Venezuelans eking out a living in Bogota. I mean, it is a disaster, but do we really care about democracy in Venezuela? My thing is, no way. I mean, we've supported brutal dictators in Colombia. Venezuela. We supported Caracazo. That was the killing of up to 3,000 innocent civilians under Carlos Andrés Perez in Venezuela. Elliot Abrams, Trump's, special envoy to Venezuela, is actually a criminal. He was involved in Iran-Contra, which was selling weapons to Iran and selling the proceeds to the Contra, these group of terrorists in Nicaragua. So he supported terrorism, we could make the argument. And this is very important to understand. So, do we have a closing of space to kind of criticize allies? Because most allies in the world of the United States, China, and Russia are not democracies as we would like to think. We just turn a blind eye. So for Russia and China, they're saying, Maduro, the president of Venezuela, is the elected president. And we don't support Maduro. We support Juan Guaido, saying he's the elected president. I personally wouldn't support either of them, and I think it's going down a really bad way. But it is becoming more of a military dictatorship in Venezuela with Vladimir, not Putin, Padrino, taking over Venezuela. The military has never had this much power, and Maduro knows it, and that's the way he can stay in power, is by giving the military a huge amount of power. That's the same thing where I said before, Egyptianization of Venezuela. So this is just not the Middle East. This goes to Africa. This goes to a broad range of places. Is the rivalry between countries, state actors, now so big that we're going into a Cold War? Human rights are relegated to the past. We don't have to talk about them. We just want allies. And Russia, because it can't take probably the United States in a one-on-one war, doing these kind of, with a lack of a better word, passive-aggressive things, like paying off the Taliban to kill American soldiers. Is this the new wave of the future for these state-on-state power rivalries? And then when we get to later, the cybersecurity issues is going to be incredibly important, because those are other ways. We live in an incredibly diverse world where it's not just about attacking each other. Now there's attacking. U.S. soldiers are everywhere in the world, so it's attacking them. And it's also through cyber attacks, with Russia and China are being blamed. But we have done cyber attacks to them as well. So I'm going to end there, and you can take this. This was very important to understand the power of the president's daily briefs, but you actually have to read them. And they were very important documents written by experts in the field, and not saying that they're always true, but they have to be taken seriously. And if that the evidence shows that there was evidence that Russia was supporting bounty on the killing of U.S. soldiers, that's very problematic for U.S. foreign policy, and might even draw a bigger wedge between Trump and the intelligence community. So I hope everyone's staying there safe, and I hope you like my pictures and all the videos and everything that we have done, I have done in Latin America and everything else, and I hope you enjoy these videos. Take care.